This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, welcome back to Principles of Macroeconomics. I am still your host, Dr. B. Happy to have all of you with us as we explore a little bit further this concept called taxation or taxes, which is certainly not my favorite subject because I don't like taxes, but we'll talk more about that as we go throughout the chapter. Before we jump into the chapter, I just want to quickly call your attention to the classroom, where we are and what's going on for this week. So here we are in week. Let me jump back in the student view, just so it looks exactly the way you see it. So here we are in week number, holy smokes, we're in week 6 already. So week 6, here's what we got going on. We got 2 chapters to get through today. I just want to quickly show you a couple things here. So here we are, week at a glance, all the good stuff, what we got going on. We're going to cover chapters 8 and 9 today. The PowerPoint presentations are on the next page. There's a discussion, I think there's a hypothesis this week, isn't there? Now, let me just double check. So we got chapters 8 and 9. There's your PowerPoint presentations there. If you want to follow along, you can download those or whatever you like to do with them. Yep, we have a hypothesis for this week. So with respect to the hypothesis, just so you all are well aware of how they work. Oh, well, let me click on it for whatever reason. But with the hypothesis for this week, just so you know, and thank you both for getting us started. So with respect to the hypothesis, the way it works is it opens up just like this. You will select the text that you want to make a comment on, or what we call annotation. You click the annotation button. You will type in your couple of sentences, paragraph, whatever, and then you'll click on the post. And then, of course, it's always excellent practice to be able to earn the full points to respond to one of your classmates. So I would respond to Bo's comment, say, "Hey, Bo, this is excellent work. Have you thought about this?" Or something engaging, right? And then you'll click post, and then that's it. It's nice and simple. It's easy to do. So as long as you follow those steps, you'll be fine. So that's the hypothesis for this week. And also for this week, we have the Chapter 8-9 quiz. So with respect to that, let's go ahead and jump into our conversation on Chapter 8, the cost of taxation, one of my not so favorite topics. Again, taxes. Not a big fan of taxes. Okay, let's talk about this tax thing. So we talked briefly last week about taxes, and in previous chapters a little bit about taxes and what they do. The idea behind a tax is that we pay taxes in order to fund public works, public projects, public infrastructure. We pay taxes to build schools, build roads, pay for our fire department, police department, the utility departments, etc., right? All of these reasons we pay taxes. It helps to run our federal, state, and local governments. And, the idea here is that with us paying taxes, we're funding these things. How are taxes collected? We talked about this briefly last week when we talked about the surplus, remember? The taxes come from both the buyers and the sellers, right? The sellers have to pay the tax when they purchase their products to sell, right? The sellers also have to pay tax to the agencies when they sell the good, right? They collect that tax from the buyers, the customers. The customers pay the buyer the sales tax on the goods and services that they purchase from the seller, and the seller remits those taxes to the tax agencies. So that's a very general sense of how taxes work in business. So let's talk about the cost of those taxes. A tax on a good or a service is paid by the buyer. Okay, we, the consumers, we pay taxes on the goods and services that we purchase. Based off of this sales tax that is incurred, the demand curve shifts downward by the size of the tax. The higher the taxes are, the lower the demand typically is. Okay. On the seller side, the suppliers, the retailers, the tax on the good or the service is paid for by the sellers. The supply curve shifts upward by the size of the tax. So we can see it's an inverse relationship here. The tax on goods and services on the buyers and sellers have that inverse relationship. There's the same outcome where the price wedge is represented by the tax. Prices paid by the buyers rise. So in other words, the suppliers, the buyers, the retailers, the sellers, right? Or, I'm sorry, the buyers. The buyers, those are the consumers. The consumers pay additional. The additional is the tax. So it's the sales price plus tax, right? And the price received by the sellers falls, meaning the retailer only receives the sale price. They take that sales tax and they remit that to the tax agency. It's like a pass-through. Think about business, okay? I'm going to give you an example. Macy's, the retailer, okay? I went into Macy's the other day and I purchased a red t-shirt for $20. All right? So follow the story. I went into Macy's. I purchased a red t-shirt for $20. Okay? I brought the t-shirt to the cash register. They scanned it. And the clerk, the cashier said, Dr. B, that'll be $21.50. So $21.50 is my total. The sticker says $20. I pay $21.50. Okay? Macy's doesn't keep the whole $21.50. They only keep $20. They got to pay the $1.50 to the tax agency. Okay? The federal, state, local governments for sales tax. So $20 is the sale price. I paid $21.50. Okay? So in other words, my price rose by $1.50 for the tax. I paid the $21.50 to Macy's. Macy's only gets to keep the $20. The $1.50 Macy's has to pay to the government. So therefore, the amount that the seller received falls. You see what I'm saying? Because they only get to keep that 20. This usually results in lower quantities sold. The higher the tax, the less people want to buy. So, with tax burdens, they're distributed between both the consumers and the producers. It's determined by the elasticities of supply and demand. Remember we talked about elasticity. Think about the rubber band effect, okay? Elasticity is a measurement of the willingness, right? The willingness to pay. If something is inelastic, that means that there's no substitute and that it's a necessity. Inelastic things include things like housing, transportation, fuel, utilities, etc. Things that they have to pay. Doesn't matter the price, they still got to pay it. Those are inelastic goods. Elastic goods are goods that can be substituted by like products, and the demand for those goods and services are highly elastic. In other words, uh, if the price goes too high, the demand will go down, you see. So with taxes, it's typically elastic, typically elastic. I mean, we have to pay tax on everything, but we more specifically have to pay taxes on goods and services that we don't necessarily need, but we still buy, you see. So that tax is a burden on both the buyers and the sellers. And the market for those particular goods becomes smaller when the taxes rise. Let's take a look graphically at the effect from taxes. So here we can see a supply and demand graph. On our y-axis, we have the price. On our x-axis, we have the quantity. We see the price paid or, without tax at the point of equilibrium, okay? When we include tax, the price paid, of course, is higher. And as the price is higher, we see of course, the demand is going to be a little less, right? And we also see that represented by the area in between this size of the tax. We know that both the seller and the buyer pay taxes on that good and service. Okay, think about Macy's. When Macy's purchases the red shirts from their vendors, they got to pay tax to the vendor, right? And then when the buyer comes in to purchase the red shirt from Macy's, they also have to pay tax on that same shirt, the Macy's. You see how that works? So both sides are paying taxes. That's why we see the size of the tax shared equally between the buyers and the sellers. That's what this represents. So the idea, again, behind taxes is that we pay taxes to the government for the benefit of the society, right? Economic welfare. The buyers and sellers have surpluses, as we talked about last week. And the government gets their revenue from taxes. That's how the government funds pretty much everything, is from our taxes that we pay. And not just sales tax, of course, but the government also collects other types of taxes, like property tax, income tax, you name it, right? So how do we calculate the total revenue that the government collects through sales tax? We take the tax times the quantity. Tax times the quantity. So if you think about, let's think about DC, okay? We think about the number of households in DC and the amount that each household pays in property tax. We multiply that by the number of households in DC, and that is the tax revenue for DC from property taxes. You can do that without pretty much any other tax. It's simply the amount of the tax times the number of people being taxed. And of course, taxes benefits the society. What we mean by that is taxes are used to build schools, build roads, pay for social services, to fund the fire department, police department, and other services, other departments. So looking at it graphically, the government collects tax. It's the amount of the tax times the number of people. That represents the tax revenue. Okay. The government calls taxes revenue because that is how the government is funded. That's where they collect their money from. It's from taxes. Right? So so that's how we can graphically see the supply and demand for taxes, for tax revenue. Now, of course, the tax revenue changes. And why does it change? People leave the society, they leave the economy, or they come into the economy, or into society. And also, the tax amount changes from time to time. Okay, so therefore, we can see that the tax amount will change. So graphically, we can look at these changes and determine what we call deadweight loss from tax, which is essentially the difference. Okay, so here graphically we see a couple of different areas: A, B, C, D, E, and F, and we can see where things are represented. So A represents consumer surplus with taxes. So A, B, and C represents the consumer surplus side. D, E, and F represents the producer side. And so we can see that areas C and E represented is representative of the tax, and therefore we say that the amount of the tax only, we call that a deadweight loss for buyers and sellers. The reason why they call it a deadweight loss is simply because that the tax does not belong to the buyer or the seller. It belongs to the government. So both the buyers and the sellers have to pay tax to the government for goods and services bought and sold. That's what that means. So let's look at the tax impact on both the consumers and producers. If there were no tax, there would be no government revenue. And if there's no government revenue, there's no government programs. Okay? That's what this basically tells us. So with the tax, both consumers and producers have to pay the tax, and that tax amount is considered what we call a deadweight loss because it goes to the government. In very basic sense, right? So we think about taxes as being a loss to both the buyers and the sellers for that reason. The taxes are, of course, above the sale price and the purchase price. And that tax amount goes to the government. So therefore, it's a loss to both the buyer and the seller. We call it a deadweight loss because, ultimately, it doesn't belong to the buyer or the seller. It belongs to the government. Taxes can sometimes make markets relatively inefficient. What I mean by that is some goods are taxed higher than others. It depends on what those goods are. Okay? The government has certain tax rates for luxury goods versus regular staple goods. Okay? Luxury goods are typically taxed at a higher rate because they're luxury in nature. Think about a hotel, for example. Some of you might be hospitality majors, so this is kind of an important thing to understand. You think about the hotel business. If you've ever stayed at a hotel, oftentimes there's a lot of different types of taxes involved. One tax might be occupancy tax, another tax is the city tax, another tax is the state tax, and then sometimes you got like resort tax. Okay, so all of those things would show up on the guest folio, right? You got all these different kinds of taxes when you stay at a hotel. In fact, it typically amounts on average, US national average, I think it's like 21% of the total amount of the hotel bill is taxes. Okay. So it's a lot. The hotel doesn't benefit from collecting those taxes. They take all those taxes and remit those to the tax agencies. And the guest at the hotel certainly doesn't benefit from paying those taxes because that's an additional thing they got to pay. So it has an impact on the hotel market for that reason, you see. So when there's overtaxation on certain goods and services, there's a negative implication for the market. Right? So just an interesting thing to think about. In looking at and understanding that taxes are a deadweight loss for both the buyers and the sellers, it's important to note that sometimes this can result as a gain on trade. What I mean by that is when you have a company who's manufacturing products in, we'll say, Mexico, and they're importing their goods to the United States, there could be a gain from trade for that reason. Why? Because the purchase price of those goods are less than the same goods made in the United States. Okay, so therefore, I'll pay the extra tax because it came from Mexico because it's still less than the purchase price if it was made in the United States. Therefore, there's a gain on the trade. You see what I'm saying? So the country benefits from trade when there's taxes involved. That's why you'll hear politicians, especially presidential politicians, talking about things like tariffs and taxes on imported goods and services. It makes the reason why that politicians like to put taxes on goods and services that are imported is there's a few reasons why they do that. One is that it protects the industries nationally. Okay, it gives the national production a fighting chance against the import. All right, that's one of the reasons. Another reason is because the country gains on those taxes. If I charge a 200% import tariff tax on a good coming in from another country, that's good for the government, right? Because the government's collecting that 200% tax, not the company. The company isn't benefiting from this. The buyer's not benefiting from this. The government is. So when the government benefits, we call that a gain from trade, you see? And that's a result of the tax. So again, a deadweight loss is when both the buyers and the sellers do not benefit from the tax. The tax is simply remitted to the government. Therefore, it is a deadweight loss for both the buyers and the sellers. There can also be a loss from a gain from trade. But when there's a loss from the trade, that typically means that it's more cost effective for the goods and services to be imported than it is to be produced here. Yeah, that's what that means. That's when there's a loss from trade. So, yeah, it works the same way as it does with the buyers and sellers. The only difference is we're talking about the government. Yeah, but it works. The concept works the same exact way. We talked about price elasticity a few times already. Remember, price elasticity is the willingness of the willingness of the buyers to pay, right? And so that willingness gets a lot less when it's inelastic, or remains the same when it's inelastic. It becomes less when the price goes up due to elasticity. The willingness to pay is a little less. So remember, think about the conversation we had on elasticity. So the supply and demand is relatively elastic, especially when we introduce taxation as a part of the total price. And that the other thing to remember is that the tax itself is a deadweight loss. Neither the buyer or the seller benefit from the tax. And this is a nice graphical representation of that type of elasticity. When we introduce the tax, the price goes up. As we can see, when it's inelastic, it doesn't matter, right? When it's inelastic, it doesn't matter because the buyers are still going to buy. This would be things like, again, housing, fuel, transportation, clothing, that type of thing. It's relatively inelastic, or groceries, relatively inelastic. It's elastic when the goods are elastic, like luxury goods, etc. We see the price a lot higher, and the demand's just not going to be as high. So, but but the thing to take away from this is that for inelasticity, not a big difference here. Relatively small in terms of the taxation deadweight loss. When it's elastic, a much larger deadweight loss from the tax. And oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, for something like a luxury good, the tax is going to be higher on that good than any other good or service. So that's really the thing to take away. This slide's very, very similar. It's just showing us that comparison again, even when there's a shift in the demand. So as the tax increases, the deadweight loss is, of course, going to increase. Very straightforward. Deadweight loss is the tax. Why? Because neither the buyer or the seller benefit from the tax, because the tax is collected from both the buyers and the sellers, but that tax is remitted directly to the government. Neither the buyer or the seller benefits, therefore it is a deadweight loss. And that deadweight loss increases as the tax rate increases. That makes sense. Tax revenue is what the government collects, right? So the government considers taxes revenue. Think of the government as being a business. How does the government earn money? Through taxes, right? That's how the government operates, is through the collection of taxes. So as the tax revenue increases for the government, or if it increases initially and then decreases, we see that from a higher tax, it drastically reduces the size of the market. That makes perfect sense. So think about how taxes work. The higher the taxes, the less people are willing to pay for those goods and services. Therefore, the market for those goods and services will be lower, will be smaller. So the amount that they initially collect when the tax goes up is high. And then as people catch on and notice, hey, this is too expensive, the amount that they're going to collect is going to go down. Makes perfect sense, right? So here we can see the shift. A small tax, and this would be letter A, representative of an inelastic good or service. Relatively small tax amount, deadweight loss is going to be pretty small. We see the medium tax. This is representative of an elastic good, and we can see that the deadweight loss is substantially larger. Letter C represents a shift in the tax rate. So taxes went up on a particular good or service. We see that the initial tax revenue was huge, and then all of a sudden it dropped off Why? Because the demand went way down as soon as the tax went way up, right? So that's what we see. And this slide shows us that inverse relationship. So on the left side, we see the deadweight loss. As taxes rise, so does the deadweight loss. That's the relationship. On the other side, on the right side, we see that the tax revenue plateaus at a certain point. You can only tax so much until you hurt the market. That's why we see oftentimes that the taxes for certain goods and services don't change that much. If they did, that we'll see a shift, right? It'll plateau. I'm only willing to buy so much at a certain price point. The minute those taxes go higher above that price point, I'm not willing to buy anymore. And therefore, I'll leave the market. And that's what we see with the Laffer curve here on the right. That point of plateau, right? All of a sudden it goes down. Why it goes down? Because the tax rate went up. Tax rate went up, I'm not going to buy as much. Or I'll leave the market. So therefore the tax revenue ultimately goes down. You see? It plateaus at a certain point. The Art Laffer curve. Art Laffer, and I think I brought up his name once or twice before. Famous economist during the Clinton administration, came up with this really intelligent way of looking at taxes, which is that Laffer curve, the one on the right that I showed you, this one here. It basically says that at a certain point, when we raise taxes too high, people are going to leave the market. That market will shrink, right? And at that point, we're not going to be able to collect as much tax revenue because less people are going to buy, right? It's just logic, right? So it's a logical thing. If there's a cut in the federal income tax rates, this will lead to higher income. Probably yes. Why? Because if you pay less in taxes, less in income tax right now, if your income taxes were lower than they are today, you're going to spend that saved money and you're going to buy more goods and services. Probably, right? So instead of saving, you're going to spend more if the taxes are lower. Makes sense. And so when those taxes are lower, the government actually collects more taxes from the goods and services that you bought. You see? So that's how it works. So ideally, we can't live without taxes, unfortunately. I wish we could, because I hate taxes. But I'll say that taxes are a necessary thing that we have to do in order to fund our government. The government's responsible for funding education, fire, police, infrastructure, roadways, etc. So where's the balancing act? It's difficult. Some people support what we call a flat tax, and that works for some states, like Pennsylvania has a flat tax. Other taxes, they have other states, they have tax brackets. For the federal government, they have tax brackets. It actually mirrors what we have in Maryland. Is there a right solution? Probably not, but could it be better? Yes. Len, I see your hand. Go ahead, Len.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, is there like listening to you in the lecture here, I was wondering, is there like a math equation where you can like add up the roads and bridges and schools and the pension will last at the current tax rate and then just do, just I divide that by how much new tax revenue is coming in by also added by the amount of new births and deaths, subtracted by the amount of deaths and people move out of the area. Do they have a tax equation like that, or is that something that has to be?
So Len, I got most of what you said. It sounds like your internet connection might be a little loose today. But based off of the question that I understood is that is there an equation or maybe a series of equations that you can use in order to, is it kind of like fund the pensions, or what's the, I guess, what's the crux to your question? Uh, Len, the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes. There are formulas out there that you can use to manipulate changes in tax revenue to fund various things, like like pensions, for example. Um, what I would recommend that you look for is actually it's, you don't want to eat it's because you wouldn't use just a formula. You want to use a model. And so how might you go about doing that, you might ask? I'm so glad you asked that question. So what I would do, this is just me, and this is a UDC thing, okay? UDC is paying for Copilot. I don't know if how many of you know that or not, but you have a subscription at no cost to you for Microsoft Copilot. So if you open up Microsoft Copilot, okay, copilot.microsoft.com, and you sign in using your UDC credentials, okay, we can ask Copilot, which is an artificial intelligence program, for a tax model. Say, create a tax model and provide an example where the government collects taxes to pay for a pension program, include changes in the, what do you think, Len? Number of people? We could say, I don't know if you, Len, I don't know if your computer froze. I'm still here, right? Everyone else can hear me? Just want to make sure. All right, cool. Thanks, Kit. Uh, include the changes in the number of participants in the pension program. You see how specific this is, right? This is called prompt engineering. With artificial intelligence, you could the more specific you are and what it is that you're trying to create or what you're trying to look for, the better the results will be. Right? Give it as much detail as you possibly can. So let's see what it does, okay? Okay, so here we go. It's developing a tax model, income rate tax 10%, taxable income of 1 billion, total tax revenue 100,000, which is the 10% rate, number of participants 100,000, annual pension per participant $1,000, payout, right? So it's running through the examples. It's running through the scenarios. So here I can see what happens when the tax rate changes, number of participants, etc. So this is an example, and Len, welcome back up. Glad you made it back. So what I did, Len, is I asked artificial intelligence Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, which you have a subscription to at no cost to you through UDC. I said, hey, create a tax model, provide an example where the government collects taxes to pay for a pension program. Include changes in the, well, I spelled number wrong, participants in the pension program. And so it ran through a model. It's, based off 10% rate, $1 billion, tax revenue of 100 million, which is 10% of $1 billion, of course. Number of participants in the pension program is 100,000, pension rate of 1,000 per person, etc. So it rolls through the scenario, right? And then of course, so here we are, year one, and then in year two, there's a change in the tax rate from 10% to 11%, so forth and so on. So to answer your question, Len, yeah, there's a couple formulas out there. But I don't know if I would use a formula. I might use a model instead. So for something that's that complex. But great question. So and hopefully that helps to answer it. But and hopefully this little demonstration was helpful for those of you interested in what AI can do. Okay, so are there any questions about the taxes before we roll on to the next chapter, which is on international trade? All good with taxes? Okay, great. Let me go ahead and stop the recording here, and we'll start the next one on international trade, and then we'll wrap up. So please stand by.